Welcome to Podcasting and Platforms. My name is Chris Spangle. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. And we are live at Switchboard just outside of the Circle City Studios. That's right. The brand new podcast studios here in Indianapolis at Switchboard 801. It is a beautiful space that you can rent, so please come check it out. Send me an email, chris@podcastingandplatforms.com. So if you're local to Indianapolis, you can come check it out. But this is not a commercial for the podcast studio. This is a live podcast, a continuation of our live and in-person podcasts. And we are so excited that all four of you are here. Just be
100 for 100.
And two of them are talking to each other, not listening to us. But this is Brandon Peters is my guest, host of the Brandon Peters Show, and also what's your title at PopCon?
I am I'm the host and programmer and I guess producer of the podcast stage at PopCon and the commissioner of the podcast awards for PopCon.
Do you have like a big cigar when you're deciding?
I don't smoke cigars, but maybe like a bubblegum one, that would work. So maybe, I don't know, the big words that get tossed around, and it's like, okay, sure, that sounds important.
Yeah, and you've been a podcaster for how long?
So 2012 is when my first foray into podcasting, coming off of being sort of a turn from writing. It was like the next step for me with my film writing and stuff like that.
Film writer, okay.
Yeah. So I was, this was mainly like reviews and essays and things like that was what I was doing at the time.
So what's the Brandon Peters Show about?
Oh, man. So intentionally called the Brandon Peters Show, which, I mean, it's kind of...
Innovative, much like the Chris Spangle Show. I needed a name, so I just went with mine.
So when I debuted it, like people are like, some people are like, what's his new show going to be called? And I was like, the lamest thing possible because I don't want it to limit me. So as long as I'm there, people are getting what it's saying. Yeah. So there's a lot of different avenues I've done. Currently running on my show it's called The Summer of 2004 at 20, which is a summer series I run from May to August. And it's a movie-based podcast about the summer movies that came out that year.
Yeah.
And basically the idea is a listener would come in and sort of get the experience of what somebody who was going to see a certain movie a certain weekend in 2004 would have had in their pop culture life. We talk about news stories. We talk about what was the hot shows on TV during that week. Like Friends ended and Frasier ended back-to-back weeks in 2004. So we talk about things like that, and then like the top songs on the radio at the time. Usher was like the king of that summer. He had his Confessions album. And then we talk about the box office because I do this with Scott Mendelson from, used to be with Forbes and The Wrap, and then now he's with Puck News. And I wonder where he's going to be next year because every year it's been a different one. But he was with Forbes for like a good 10 years before he moved on. But
yeah, it's hard being a writer now in the journalist industry.
Yeah, well, they paywalled it, and his finance, I think it was just kind of like his traffic was going down when they paywalled Forbes. But that's his discussion to tell people about. And then Aaron Neuwirth from We Live Entertainment and Out Now with Aaron and Abe, who kind of is pivotal in my steps to podcasting because I started as a guest on his show.
And the great Jessica Alsman, who is my best friend at work, along with Jeff Hoskey.
She's the voice of my show, so yeah.
Oh, she is?
Yeah, she does all my like intros, outros, and stuff, but she's a regular guest as well, too.
Yeah. So we're continuing I think it's going to be kind of bi-monthly. So, we started out the podcasting meetup hybrid. So this is an experiment, Brandon. I don't know if you watched the first one, but I'm kind of beta testing this year the idea of in-person meetups and a live podcast as a way to build friendships.
Right.
And so we do have several returning folks here and a lot of radio people. I would say most of the table, as we were sitting just kind of having a conversation before we started, was all radio folks, including myself. And I've been in it 20 years. I'm not even going to ask Ken. How many years in radio? 70? 1970. Wow. Okay. All right. Yeah. That's like as long as D-Day. 70,
it's a little
70, 80, 90, 2010. So 50 years in radio. That's pretty cool. Okay. children.
The wilderness years.
Let me tell you, children really, that's a big reason we missed April's. Yeah, so I just kind of want to give it a quick update of where we're at with it and kind of what I'm learning as we're doing it. The first one we had 50, the second we had 30 people. This one we had 6, 7. Now there's
a full table.
I didn't do nearly the amount of promotion that I needed to do. There's the Pride Festival is happening right now. About a mile away, and then also it's June, so everybody's on vacation. So, the discipline of doing this on a consistent cadence, I've found I let myself slip on some of the promotional stuff. And you sort of go, oh man, I got to get that done. I got to get that piece done. And I probably only did like 2 or 3 posts and sent it out to my email list once, where the first one was probably double that.
Okay.
And then the first one took me like 3 hours to set up. I did this in 45 minutes today, right? So there's things that just get a little bit easier, and then there are things that get a little bit harder. But I feel like if you do a podcast, that promotional piece, I think I heard you say it at the table, man, the hardest part of being a podcaster is not doing the show. It's maybe not even the editing piece. It's like remembering to tell people about your podcast.
Right. Yeah. I get to a certain point in the day, like I try to... So my show's been doing so well right now that I have moved. Like normally I would hit at 10 in the morning because here in the East Coast, be 10, people getting up on the West Coast.
Right.
So if nationally, the global people are going to pick it up whenever. But then it's been doing so well in the mornings. I've been waiting until about like noon or 1 and to promote any kind of new episode and then
so you watch it, and when the downloads start to lag off, then you try to plug it on your social?
But it was starting to make me feel comfortable with sharing it later, or if I forgot till late afternoon to be okay with it later. But I got to get it that day at some point when it drops. But like, it's not just sharing it and going, here's my episode. You got to think of something to say to promote it that's not super lengthy, that's kind of short and tight and concise, but also spell check, grammar check. And so, because you want people to take to take you kind of seriously or make it look like this is worthwhile. They spend time on what they're presenting. Yeah. And because, you're like proud of this thing you're putting out there and you want it to look good in the eyes of your advertisement. You're your own advertisement and you're the only person who can check. So like I go back and I'm the person who goes back and edits social media posts for spelling errors, or I like this wording better and stuff. And period.
I think that matters. I think that's a level of professionalism. And like I write and post so many things a day. The amount of content that I distribute because of work is crazy. And like Grammarly is a lifesaver. Yeah. Because you have to make sure that you're professional in how you put yourself out there, right? Yeah. So you should edit.
So you want to look good in the eyes of people, and the stranger that's going to see your post because somebody liked it or someone shared it or something like that, and who knows what happened. And you got to know. You also got to know, what's my Facebook following like? What do they comment like? How do they see me? How does Instagram see me? How does Twitter, or X, or formerly known as Twitter, as we say, how does each platform see you? And I've noticed my audience is kind of different on each, treats me different on each.
For sure.
It's a different idea, and you got to have that in mind when you do it as well. And that's a lot going through your head for like what people probably think is 5 minutes can take up to a half hour just to share your new episode on social media.
One thing that I was playing with this week is Apple's podcast promotional tool. And you apparently can get Chartlift by using this tool. So just Google Apple Podcast Promotional Tool. And this tool, somehow, if you use the image and you use their link, the image even gives you credit in their algorithms within the charts. And so I monitored it using Chartable for the Chris Spangle Show. I had 2 episodes this week. And I used the Apple promotional tool on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram Stories. And in the news commentary category, the Chris Spangle Show was at 280. And it was like at 210 last night before I went to bed after 2 days. So it popped me up 70 spots in the news commentary because I was using the Apple promotional tool. And if you can get in that top 200, then you get discoverable. As people go to the category, they can start scrolling through and they see the top 200 in your category. So yeah, that's one tip that I saw. I saw it work at Bob and Tom when we were using it when it first came out, and I got that tip. we went from 250s, 260s in the comedy charts up to like 140.
Oh, okay.
So, with it, Bob and Tom has like a lot of downloads a month, a lot, hundreds of thousands, right? And so that combined with just the reach of the social media really, really can help. So they're trying to basically like go after Spotify because Spotify has made it so easy to share that I just always go to Spotify, even though I don't listen on Spotify, I share it to the stories, to Twitter, to whatever, and I use their link. So Apple's trying to fight back a little bit because that's what Apple determined was kind of why Spotify was rising. So,
Gotcha.
So that's one thing. I think the discipline of, with We're Libertarians / The Chris Spangle Show, did not share an episode of the podcast. I think I announced like that I started the podcast, and maybe occasionally I would stream, but I don't think for the first like 5 or 6 years I ever posted my episodes. And it was like I was shy about it. Have you ever been like, I don't want to look self-promotional and douchey by putting this out there? Have you ever had that mentality with this?
Yeah, I did, but also I have like a little bit of a showmanship bit of me that is kind of like that, and like I think most of my social media now is just based around my show. Like I don't have like I have personal opinions, but like I want you to hear me talk about them. I want you to read my full piece or something like if I wrote. That's kind of where I'm at with that. I do clips of my show and stuff now. That's a whole nother thing. What clip am I going to use from that? Like I recorded like a lot of these episodes I'm dropping now. I recorded back in January and February, and I'm like, wait, what was a good one from that one to kind of do and use now? But there's a shyness to it because there's a weird dynamic between, let's say you go on Facebook, and a lot of your Facebook is primarily family and friends, I would say, is your, the people who follow or friend you.
Right.
And you get like nothing from them a lot of the time. Yeah. That's the weird thing. And then you're like, are they going to talk and be like, man, like I'm some schlocky, look at this grifter, like doing all this stuff. But like, it's funny when I share it to my personal page, I don't get like a lot of likes or comments from family and friends, but then I'll like see them with my new show. And I had a friend, I recently saw a college friend that had, and a bunch of them live in the same town and hang out now. And we were talking about you. I was like, okay, we're really happy. Like, you're still doing it, man. You're like still out. We go like golf and that's fun, or we just do family stuff, but you're still out there. You're still like really I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, well, why don't you like my posts? Why don't you share it? Why don't you tell
never
people?
know who's actually watching and engaging with it.
Do you listen? And it's really strange when people will tell you like, oh yeah, I listen to your show once. I'm like, oh, you do? Like, it's really weird, but they don't let you know on social media or anything like that. Yeah. So I have always found and stuff that like, while social media is nice, but it's a really weird gauge of what people think is successful. That's not. Like I've seen people, like I tell people when we're like helping podcasters and telling them about stuff, like I've always been about, it's not how many you have in followers or something, it's that you have the right ones. And when you had Garrett and struggling on his name now, Jordan from
No Dishes Bloomington.
Live
on the PopCon stage.
They brought up a key thing that goes right with my mentality is like, we're in Bloomington doing local restaurants. We're never going to hit like a huge threshold, but we're going to hit the right one. So we are good advertisements locally, because if we have our thing. And like my thing is too, like Scott Mendelson, who I just mentioned, always goes back to this. He had a blog. And I started writing, helping him fill some space because he got a job at like a legal firm and didn't have time to write every day. And I give him pieces here and there, but he didn't have that big of a following on that. But one of those followers was from Forbes, and they hired him after a couple of years of reading his stuff.
Which is the number one way to monetize your podcast. Do something in a niche and then get noticed, and someone will hire you.
Yeah, and that's what I tell people. And I notice I have it. My YouTube's newer to me with this podcast. I never utilized YouTube before. I see like how many subscribers I have, and then I see people with a lot more. I get a consistent amount of good like views for what I have, but I look at people with thousands, and like I look at their videos like 1 view, 2 views, and I'm like, so you have 10,000 people, but they're not even like watching, engaging. Like I want engagement. I want actual people that actually take in when I not just like a friend, like, hey, I'll follow you back, and I don't even pay. Like I have a joke on X where I think I'm I'm with a lot of film writers and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't think anybody reads anybody else's pieces. We just know what you have on there. Like, is anybody really reading what so-and-so does, or we just like their Twitter presence and act like, they're a great writer? I'm like, have you read their stuff?
So this is actually a reason I just sold to Brian Nichols the We Are Libertarians Facebook page. It has 88,000 likes.
Yeah.
Used to have 100,000 likes, and then so many people have deleted their Facebook account that it's just... And we basically, the page has been kind of dormant for the last 4 years, because during 2020 I realized the only way to get engagement with that page, even though it had so many likes, was to push the anger button. Was to post something inflammatory that would make that particular audience mad. So when I had a libertarian socialist co-host and I gave him access to the page was full of a lot of right-leaning libertarians. So the libertarian socialist would just post some hate. Not even hate. He would just post like his opinion in a very polite way, and then it elicit the hate, and we get like 3 million engagements on those posts. And so, and then you get a lot of people like, yeah, man, finally somebody's saying it. And then, oh, why did you let that guy? And it just got so stressful for Ryan that like he stopped, I stopped. And I just realized this is really unhelpful for society in general. And I'm just going to post our content. I removed everybody as an admin and just started posting links to our podcasts. And with a page of 88,000 people, when I post a link to our podcast, I get 15 to 100 views on that post. And then if it's a live stream, 200 to 500 views, right? Which, look, there's 200 to 500 people there that are hearing your show, that may become a subscriber, that are hearing your message. But out of a page of 88,000, it just was not... The reality is they want you to pay them for pages to work. And so it's just one other channel that I had to post to that just kind of was sitting there. And Brian, being a little more right-leaning, I think can benefit a lot from that audience.
Okay.
Whereas it just was extra work that wasn't benefiting the podcast at all anymore. And we added like 150 new people to our Facebook group. Those 100 to 150 new people that are going to be in our Facebook group are worth every bit of what the 150 that we're watching already. And that Facebook group, even though, so we used to have 2,500, they took our Facebook group. I posted a meme of Jeffrey Dahmer that said, "This doesn't taste like Five Guys," and he was at a hamburger shop. And they took my group because of a joke, and that really like hurt us a lot, because that 2,500 people in that Facebook group was the core of our new Patreon members. Our Patreon completely stopped growing.
Oh wow!
After that, and it was like a meteor hit the brand. But I'm a big believer in Facebook groups because of my experience with the Pat Down podcast, with Bob and Tom.
So Jessica told me about Bob and Tom. That was a huge thing. Like, we can't get engagement. You created a group, boom, the engagement happened.
It's all there. Yeah. So to me, a Facebook group is everybody's on Facebook. Like if your audience skews a lot younger than mine, right? So maybe, most of my podcasts, it's people 30 and up, right? And all of those people are on Facebook, right? Maybe you should be on TikTok if you're doing pop culture. I don't know. But to me, Facebook groups are great for podcasts, for building engagement. And every brand I've used a podcast group for, except for one podcast, but that's because the host doesn't engage in there. It's just sort of like me posting the episodes, so there's no interaction, right? So there's no effort being made, so there's no results that are coming from it.
So you mentioned TikTok, which I'm still not on there, but what's your limit at social media places? Because I see them and I'm like, that's just another one that's going to eat up 10 to 15 minutes of me trying to keep myself active there. Yeah. So I've just like, I'm gonna be where I'm at, and if I catch on or if something catches on, somebody else can share my stuff to TikTok.
My whole day job is making TikToks for Bob and Tom. So that's what I do, and I would say like the order of priority for content for social media is video, particularly vertical video with captions, because 80% of people watch without the sound on. So vertical video with captions, and then a photo, and then like dead far away last is links.
Yeah.
Like written word then links, because they don't want to send you away from the platform. Like when I have new clients, I say, look, if you're going to start a podcast, or you're going to start a social media channel for your podcast, I should say, start with LinkedIn and Instagram. Mm-hmm. Leave Facebook alone. Just use your personal, because Facebook is only going to work if you pay them. Twitter never worked. I run accounts with hundreds of thousands of likes, and back in the heyday of organic reach on social media, it'd get 9 clicks. It just never worked in terms of engagement. Facebook, I think, is dwindling. TikTok is the last bastion of organic growth. Mm-hmm. So it is worth it, because you can get on Instagram and on TikTok organic reach. So you can get beyond your circles.
Gotcha.
So if you have to put the effort into it, because I'm like you, I got to a point where I'm like, look, I was even doing like alternative social media. So like I was posting to like obscure libertarian podcast, like they had built their own social medias. I was posting like the episode link 20 different places. It would take me an hour to promote the show. It was just too much. You weren't getting any return on that investment. So I think you have to be smart and say like vertical video with captions. And there's easy ways to do that with something like, I think it's Opal or Opus. I think it's Opus, which is an AI tool. And then vid.io video is another tool where these AI tools, you ingest your video and then it will automatically cut out your clips for you.
Oh, wow.
Automatically caption. And then you'll have to do some adjusting. But then you got to post that, right?
Yeah.
Then you got to remember to put that out. I don't ever get to it for a lot of my podcasts, just because it's like a janitor's house is never clean.
Right.
It's like I'm so tired of sitting at the laptop doing reels that for my own show, I'm like behind on all that stuff. But I think if you're a podcaster and you are going to do one thing, like even if you don't do video podcasts, pull up your cell phone, use the front-facing camera, and go, hey, this week we're talking about X, right, and put that out, right? Like, and the TikTok and Reels, you can post the same thing to these different platforms. TikTok prioritizes faces and green screen and quirky facts, and Reels favors more highly produced things.
Gotcha.
But that's why on Reels you'll probably see like sit-down podcasts more, and you're never really going to see that on TikTok. You're going to see like a guy with a green screen behind him of an image, right? It's so, but again, now you've moved from a podcaster into creating another form of content.
Which you're technically, when you have a podcast, and I have no problem when I go on like my LinkedIn profile and talk about like, you're a social media manager, which is something when we first heard the term over a decade ago, people were like, I'm like, that's a lot of work.
It is.
There's a lot of work for people to do, and I'm mad respect. I wish I could have one.
Oh, that took you an hour to make that. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's exhausting, and that's one of the hardest things, because you're like, man, I just want to work on my show. I just do.
Yeah.
But
that's why I think you're better off like starting a Facebook group, doing one or two things well. But the core of this is in-person sales. It's no different than like starting, if you're a real estate agent, you're going to hit up your friends and family first and say, I'm a real estate agent now. And then you're going to maybe go to some networking events. And then you're going to like send out some mailers, or you're going to maybe do a booth at a festival or whatever. Like, I think that legwork in real relationships can be just as powerful as like me going to PopCon, reintroduced me to my friend Rachel, who we were friends in college, and she does a podcast and she's here today, right? So that effort of going there and being present at PopCon, I imagine she saw, I'm speaking for you, I'm guessing, but shake your head yes or no. You saw my name on the roster and went, oh, yeah, we had like a friendship back in the day. Let me go say hi. And then halfway through my podcast, I was like, college, that's how I know her. So I want you to know, I felt so rude that I didn't remember you like right away, but she says no big deal. So it's it's like, to me, those are the things that kind of matter more, is really why I tell people to focus locally, because your niche probably already has like 3 broadcasting, trying to get to the masses, well-produced podcasts that are kind of around your niche, but it probably doesn't have anybody locally doing a libertarian podcast, or a, we're the Indiana radio podcast of like Radio Memories and The Business, and like, like the Indiana radio Facebook group does really well because it's a collection of all these people, and it's kind of become its own little community. I'm picking on our friend Ken here, right? And so picking a niche and working in that niche locally, I think you're going to feel like you have more success because you have more conversations and relationships, as opposed to this just like, let me blast it out to social media and hope the algorithm likes me.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of stuff with locally. I do mine more globally with my thing, because my topics are kind of like that way, but it's the way I do them that I appreciate. But I've been trying to like branch more locally, get more local people with it, do like in-person events and stuff locally as well, best I can. I mean, when I first was starting out with one of my shows here, I was doing, there was a podcast that was doing a movie show at a movie theater, but like they were very nice people. I enjoyed coming, but like I just saw it and I was like, you could do so much more with this, like, because it was very enclosed and in a corner, like, and didn't have any PAs or anything, so just like these strange people with a microphone over in the corner, and that always bugged me, and it was always never about the movies. It was always about the sponsors,
right?
Because people would pay to have a seat. I got brought on as a guest or whatever. I never paid, but like sponsors would pay, and you'd be going to see like the latest X-Men movie. But if you listen to the podcast, you were hearing for, and this isn't a slight against them, but like Habitats for Humanity for like 30 minutes. Like that's not what I tuned into a show that was called Movie Night for. Like that was one of my things. But those people, I enjoyed being with them and stuff, but like I would just, I see things and I'm like, oh, if I had that privilege or whatever, I'd be doing this, but not my show. But sort of things like that. But that's like locally what could be done, but I don't know if people would want that. I don't know if bridges have been burned or whatever, but
call them out. Take this opportunity to talk trash. Let's go.
I'm not just talking trash. I was just talking about my experience and where my mind goes when I'm in that situation. But for me, locally, it's very interesting locally, and there's Indiana film community and stuff that I've talked with, but just maybe not enough.
Yeah,
from what I've done. But
again, there's only so much you can do. Right,
and family and stuff. Like for me, like my podcast, and people blows their mind with. I was just meeting with somebody recently about some in-person gigs, and they're like, wait, so you work full time, and you have and you do all the things you do? I'm like, yeah, I do. Yeah. they're just blown away, and a lot of people, when they only see your online presence, think this is like a job for me, and I was like, nah, not really.
It probably looks so much more time consuming than it actually is.
Yeah.
People are like, you have so many podcasts. I'm like, yeah, but like each one takes like 20 minutes a week, or, like, and I really enjoy it. Those are my favorite things to do. Those are my hobbies. I'd also just add, like, maybe sending direct messages to friends and DMs and email, like direct conversations and saying, hey, thanks so much, for being my friend, check out my podcast. Or, I mean, maybe that's spammy, but I also think like there's some room for having conversations with folks, reminding them that you have a podcast. You can do it in a nice way. Like,
I wish I could just launch my podcast. I wouldn't be
like, condolences on your grandma. By the way, I listened to the Chris Spangle show. But
to make you feel better.
Yeah, right. Yeah. If you want to laugh, the Pat Downs got you covered.
I will say one of the things I wish I could do is like launch my show every week. Because when I launched my new show, like, I got a lot of attention. Yeah. I got a lot of people like, oh, what's it about? Like, I'm talking like, oh, okay. Yeah. And now I'm like going into like, it'll be year 4 for this show starting in September. Or no, is it year 5? We'll start at year 5 at that point. And it's just like, it's hit different places and stuff, but it felt so like present when I launched it. I was like guesting on different things and going to different places, and people would like message me that I hadn't heard from in years. I was like, I listened to it. Oh my gosh, it's good. Or what's it going to be? And that kind of excitement, like just
That's a big reason I wanted to do this is because it's like a mini launch every month,
Yeah.
or every other month. Is the way that it'll probably turn out, and the reality is the audience and the downloads have doubled. Like the downloads are not the point. The point are the relationships that are built over time by
The
people.
friends we made along the way.
Exactly. Continuing coming and hanging out and hopefully getting some value and making some friendships. But the audience has doubled. The other thing that has been tremendous has been the business. Like there were 100 people on LinkedIn. This is what you need to know. When you do a launch or hold an event and people on social media, LinkedIn, 100 people said they were coming to this.
No.
Right. And we buy donuts based on the RSVP link on Ticket Tailor because 100 people will say they're coming to your event and then you can't trust that. But blasting that out and inviting 1,300 local people to this event make all of them, I get more profile views.
Yeah.
And I get more DMs of, hey, I've been thinking about doing a podcast. Do you do consulting or do you do editing or and so it's made people more aware over the last 6 months. I've been doing coaching and all this stuff for like 3-4 years. My business has never been busier than doing this and blasting out to my LinkedIn network that I'm doing this show.
Okay.
Because of that, like, looks big from the outside thing that you're talking about.
Right.
All of a sudden, and it also is like permission. People don't want to bother you, but they have permission to message me. Obviously, if I'm inviting you to an event, then I want
Right.
you to come and quote unquote bother me, right? So it's been very beneficial in building relationships for my business, and then also building relationships here at these monthly events. So we are going to take a question from the audience. No, we did not plant this question. The microphone's right there in the corner of that couch. This is a totally organic question from the audience. It's right. The mic's just.
It's
Right behind you.
Yeah, it's behind
Directly
you.
behind
Yep,
you there.
Yep.
Yes, I should have, when we did not plant this question, I should have told you where the microphone was going to be. So, Aaron, what's your question for us?
Chris, I've been thinking of becoming a world-famous podcaster like you, but my question is, there's so many different subjects out there to cover. How do I determine what subject is best for me?
Okay, so how do you determine, thanks, Aaron. I don't know if your mic actually got heard, but we're going to put you on mute here. I should be professional. So Aaron asked, how do I pick a subject? How do I want to do a podcast, but I don't know what to talk about. What's your advice for him, Brandon?
What are conversations you're constantly having with your friends that you feel like always
Go ahead and try. Yeah.
like get you going and make you feel good, or you can't wait to meet with these just certain group of people again because you guys always have fun talking about a certain topic?
Is there a topic that you try? Make sure the mic has an on button here. Flip it up.
Testing.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, is that coming through okay?
Yep.
Okay.
So, what's the topic that you and your friends, or that you just can't get enough of?
Is that something you'd like to recapture in a recorded
let's say,
form?
for lack of a better term, let's say blue-collar politics. So,
Blue collar politics.
Okay.
Then that's your answer.
Boom, that's a topic. Yeah, that's a topic.
what everyday kinds of people say that you don't hear on the news.
Right.
Okay. So there you go. That was real quick right there. But when you have that topic, I think an important thing to do in my eyes, like I'm always like record as soon, and start hitting record is the hard, biggest first step, hardest thing to do. But once you have your topic, I would suggest if you come up with a name, start Googling, seeing how much is out there, what's out there, listen to some of the other ones, figure out what's not working for you on them, and make your podcast that. Because you're like, if I had a podcast, like a lot of it there's a lot of reaction to what you were listening to and how you would do it. And now you have the avenue, you can do that because you're like, okay, I don't like when they do this. I like when they do this. Nobody talks about this with that. And then you form your culture and personality of the show from reacting to what's already out there. And I think that's important too, because I had a lot of times we had this group we had before called Podcast Indie. People come and they would think they had the cleverest niche idea that no one was gonna like. And this guy was like, "Well, I've had some." He's like, "This one guy came one time. He's like, I think I'm gonna do a podcast based on just talking about film scores. No one's out there." I'm like, "There's like billion out there
Right,
talking
yeah.
about that. Just like now that you have that topic, you know that topic's everywhere. What is your personality going to be? How is it going to be? But despite, hey, it's me talking about it now. Nobody, just pretend nobody knows who you are. What's our angle be? And when you record that first one, by the time you get to episode 10, you're not even probably what you were before, because you found that through going through the reps as well too.
Yeah, I mean, for this podcast, I started out, I read a book called How to Blog a Book. And I was like, maybe I want to write a book about podcasting. And so let me just start this podcast. And that's why the early episodes of this are kind of very in line of here's the steps to start a podcast. And then I kind of got bored with it. And then, I don't want to do an industry podcast. There's a ton of podcasts about the podcasting industry. I don't think that necessarily is what people are interested in. Dave Jackson does a great job of like speaking to independent podcasters and giving them tips, right? So, and there's a bunch of those kind of podcasts. So as I've done this podcast along the way, I've thought like, what do I actually have to say? What do I really think is special about podcasting? What do I think can encourage people, and how can I solve some problems? Like the problem of getting to episode 9 and feeling like nobody's listening to your show, feeling completely isolated from doing your podcast, right? So then I was doing the podcast, and maybe there were some hiatuses, but as I was doing the podcast, I'm thinking about my voice. I'm thinking about what I want to say. What do I have to offer that's different than other people? What makes my view of podcasting different than maybe Dave Jackson's or, Pod News, right? And that's really like the live and in-person pieces that you've been hearing about lately. I can't do once a week on that, right? Right. So, and I really can't do that based on my time, but I can do that once a month, right? And I can continue to kind of keep that voice out there, right? In my, I've done We're Libertarians for 13 years. It's now called the Chris Spangle Show. I got really tired of like talking about the libertarian movement. Like it just kind of got boring to me. I don't care. We still did a show this week about it because that's a piece of my audience, and I want to serve the audience that is there also, right? And I do have a little bit of interest and some things to offer. But my message with that show is the way to build a libertarian society is through local action. It's through community. It's through building strong families, being a strong individual by participating in our community in a positive way, not by tweeting, right? It's not by engaging in because when you break it down, there's 3 ways to make change: through force, using government; through profit, using business; and then through compassion and persuasion, using civil society. Right, which is families, nonprofits, that sort of thing. And there's nobody talking about that. So the thing that like made me really interested in libertarianism, there wasn't another show that really kind of engages in those conversations. And so it was a conscious choice to go, look, I could keep talking about the libertarian movement and get in fights with the biggest guys, and my numbers will probably be 4 times what they are now, or I can talk about this thing that I'm really passionate about and know that my audience is probably going to get cut in half. Turned out that it was, I would say, I wouldn't say 3/4, but I lost a lot of audience as I started talking more about civil society and less about the things that were making people mad that week. Right? It's more important to me to have a guy, Joe Garrison, on, who started the Shadeland North Alliance and basically has changed the face of his neighborhood by building communities. I'm really, really proud of that episode. It didn't get a lot of downloads, not nearly as much as the one where you're fire breathing against some other libertarian, right? But I think as you do your show, your voice evolves. And so you just start with kind of maybe imitating what everybody else does, and then over time, you turn into what you really want to say with it. But it's the habit of doing it that actually gets you to that point, right? And also, you have to enjoy what you're talking about. When you've podcasted for 10 years, Rachel's podcasted for 10 years, I've podcasted since 2007, you really have to like the topic. Like, it's the thing that when you wake up, you're kind of like excited to read those articles or check out that blog. Like, that's, to me, what you pick because if you were to try and force it, I'm interested in podcasting. I've always been as interested in podcasting as I was the politics of it, like building the podcast brand. But like, I don't wake up excited. I think maybe that's just because I do it for a living now. But I don't wake up excited to talk about podcasting. I do this podcast because I do have some things to say, but I don't have weekly things to say, right? I couldn't do this every week in and week out, and feel passionate about it after 5 years or 2 years.
Your cycle of talking would close back up way too fast all the time.
Exactly.
Because that's a lot of it with doing something like this, is that you're at some point you get back to an earlier point.
Yeah.
It's different the next time you talk about it, but that it can be a lot of cyclical and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And to your degree, one of the key things is passion, and being behind and wanting to do what you're going to do is very important. I've talked to so many people that the dollar sign is the first goal, and
It's not going to work.
I wouldn't do it.
It's not going to work.
And you got to think too. I always think too. I'm like, when it comes to the money thing, I'm like, who's going to pay for like a full on salary for me to do this? Like, where's that exist? But like my thing is purely like a lot, because I love doing it. I love doing what it is, and there's different. Set yourself goals, like realistic. What do I want out of this? What do I truly want? And like, ideally, you want to get whatever's inside of you out.
Right.
You want to create. You want to be proud of something. And listening back on your own, like you made a podcast episode, you listen back and you really like it yourself. That's a huge enough goal itself. I mean, just getting it off the ground, doing that. People will come. Eventually, you have to be patient, but you have to like doing it. And that's what I think a lot of people find is they aren't podcasters. They think they just can just hop on a mic and do it. And some can, but some can they do quality? Do they know how to structure a show? Do they know how to edit, things like that? And you'll learn along the way, but you got to enjoy doing it along the way and want to keep doing it no matter what's ahead of it. If I have 10 listeners, I have 10,000. I have a Patreon that makes 50 cents. I have one that gives me $30 a month. You know, like you never, those things can stop your like I tend to not like to look at a lot of things because I like to keep my progress going, and I don't want to take a turn because I saw something here and try harder to do something. I want to stick my course best I can. That's with me a lot of times. And I like to get with Brad Shoemaker when I've asked him about numbers. I usually tend to like just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Like that's what I don't want to see an actual number because I don't want to stop whatever progress.
It's easy
I'm
to get
on.
really demoralized by the numbers.
I see my YouTube numbers, and those can be like the things I work the hardest on, like you say. They never pan out like you want. You're like, oh, I'm so proud. This is going to be the best
But
one.
the
And
meme that you found while you were in the bathroom in the morning will get 1 million views. But the thing that you spent 10 hours working on, will get nothing. It just, I think you nailed it. Like working with clients, because I do podcast coaching and editing. I don't want to work with clients who come to me and say, I want to do this to make money. And I don't want to work with clients who come to me and say, I want to be a person of significance. I want to work with somebody who comes to me and says, I'm passionate about this topic and I want to serve audience X, right? Like there's a lot of folks who come to me and say, I want to do inspiring stories about X. I want to do inspiring stories.
Formerly known as Twitter X? No,
I want to do inspiring stories of women is a big one, right? That's done to death 1 million times, but I want you to do that topic, even though it's there's a lot of it being done, is because a year into it, you're going to develop your voice. And by the end of year 2 or 3, you're going to have built a big audience because you found your voice doing that, as long as you're consistent with it. So even if you start with a topic that a lot of people are doing, your goal is to serve an audience. Your goal is to have a message that blesses people by listening to it, right? And building a set of skills to gather those people around you. And once you've done that, then it works. But if your goal is to start a podcast because you want to be the next Gary Vee, you're never going to achieve it. Mm-hmm. Gary Vee's Gary Vee because he was successful somewhere else and came and taught the lessons that he learned doing that other thing. And that is what made him successful in the content game, is he was passionate about wine and learned and tried and failed a bunch on the wine stuff, and then said, you know what, I think I could teach people how to do content because I've reached a measure of success. Like, I should have done this 5-6 years ago, but
Right.
like I feel I've reached a level of success where I understand podcasting enough to kind of articulate some of these things. I would never have started the Podcasting and Platforms podcast in 2012 when I started my podcast.
Right.
And that to me is what a lot of people are doing, and a lot of younger people especially. It's like saying you're a life coach when you're 18. Nobody's going to hire you, right? Achieve something in an area that you're passionate about, and then money, crowds, all that stuff will come. But it really comes down to doing a thing consistently, finding your voice, and then a crowd gathers around that.
And I hate to sound like I'm on like I think so highly of myself, or like putting on a high horse with this next
guy,
statement. This next statement, and one of my friends, his name's Justin Beam, and he has a production company that does bonus features for Blu-rays, DVDs, and stuff. He shoots interviews and makes little mini documentaries. And he was explaining, we were talking off air one time when we were recording together, and he mentioned, like, he says this, and he's such a, you feel like you can go conquer the world after you talk to Justin Beam. But he's like, what you're putting together here, and you don't realize it, is a historical archive. Yeah. You're putting yourself out there. You're stacking it up. It's available all time. You know, some places will come and go. It'll be lost somewhere around the bend. But you're building a historical archive that maybe it's not at its most popular now, but somewhere down the road, it could be an essential piece of information. It could be a study. It could be this, but you're putting it out there. You're building a gigantic historical archive of something that could be useful for the future, and you just don't realize it.
My kids are really going to love that they get to see all this stuff, right? There's a lot of... And like my great grandkids aren't going to care.
Yeah, but right? they're going to be able to. It's possible they can hear your voice and they can know who you are through listening to a podcast from 100 years ago.
Which I think is really fascinating and super cool. All right, final thoughts for this episode. Give one last piece of advice to folks.
I always just say hit record and go from there. Definitely, I think if you find your niche, go beyond finding your niche by seeing the other people in the niche and responding to what you think of that in a way to cultivate your own personality, and set some awesome goals, set some good goals, attainable, farther down the line, best you can without it being, I'd like to be financially compensated for this. So like podcaster-esque goals, like, like one of my things, like I'd like to do a live version of my show somewhere.
Sure.
Done it a lot now. That was an early thing of mine, was I wanted to do my show, but live in front of an audience.
Yeah,
and that was a goal for me. Like my wife wishes I would go for like money. But I'm like, my thing is I have my podcast that opens the door for me, my opportunities as a personality from the podcast world that has done a lot with like PopCon and Oktoberfest and upcoming Days of the Dead, are allowing me these opportunities that I like doing, that are different avenues to meet different people, to grow who I am and who I can be to help others and bring along and things like that. So realistic goals that aren't completely financial. I think
a lot of people
important.
come to me overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that they have to do, and I'm like, just start at the very basic. Like my son will be 1 in a week. Mm-hmm. He's not dancing. He's crawling. And then he's working on standing up, and he's got to squat down. And now he can kind of wiggle before he falls over after half a second. It'll be way different in a week. It'll be way different in 2 months, way different in a year. So same concept. Don't feel overwhelmed by the amount of things. Man, I'm nowhere near where I want to be, and I've been doing this since 2007. Like I'm struggling with video right now. I'm like learning that skill of a good looking video podcast and a podcast studio. Like I'm struggling with it, and it's discouraging to me in some ways, but I'm just going to keep going after it and attacking it until I get it to look the way that I want it to look, like some of these bigger podcasts that have Your Mom's House has the most beautiful podcast, but they have 4 people working back there, and they have $6,000 cameras. Mm-hmm. I can't expect that mine's going to look like that, right? But with a phone, which this is on a phone,
so I use for my camera too. So you're not alone.
It can look good. It can look good enough, right? So it's until I can, build up to the 3 cameras, right? But so you just gotta start. So shameless self-promotion real quick.
Yeah, The Brandon Peters Show, which is thebrandonpetersshow.com. And you can find me on social media anywhere. You just at Brandon4KUHD. My show drops on Monday and Friday currently. And the summer 2004 at 20 series is what's going on. You can go backlog to 93 at 30 and 82 at 40. Got lots of things too. Like this is how weird. It's not just like movies is my forte, but I expanded to other things. Like there's a Troy Brownfield from the Saturday Evening Post, and I have a series we do called Products of the Panic, where we talk about media and stuff that came out during the Satanic Panic era in the United States, and we've talked about different.
That's COVID, right? Yeah. Satanic Panic when they made us wear those muzzles.
No, the comparison is Q. That's the comparison to the Satanic Panic. But we talk about there was a Geraldo special that was about it. There was a James Woods movie based on the McMartin trials and things like that. We've gone through different media. There's I think it was 60 Minutes did this whole bash piece on Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, we talk about stuff from that. He's really, really informed and studied on that era, and it's kind of fun stuff. But the stuff like that. So it's can go beyond the movies, sticks to the movies. It's kind of where I'm feeling, but I do have recurring things that happen with that.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening. If you got something out of this, please share that with your friends. Send it to them through a DM or share it on your social media. Make sure you tag us. That's how you help creators like Brandon and myself grow. That's really the only way. You heard, look, organic reach is dead on some of these social media platforms. It is down to our listeners to help us grow. So thank you so much for joining us here on Podcasting and Platforms.